Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Mindshift Experiment. We have a special guest today. This is going to be amazing. But before we get into it, I really want to say thank you so much for sticking around. I cannot believe we are going into the double digits for this episode. It is episode 10. Why can I not get over it? It also feels like it should be episode 20, D. But you know what? I digress. This has been kind of a crazy process. We've really enjoyed it. And I am one of your co-hosts, Amanda Knox.
And I'm Carter Brown. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Yeah, we had to double check, be like, wait, what episode is this? It feels like it's been forever, but also not at the same time. But, Amanda and I, we talk almost every day. And, we allow real life experiences to dictate where this podcast goes. And with the mentoring that we do and the coaching that we do, we have realized that a lot of people struggle with victim mentality, victim mindset, taking radical authority, accountability over your life. And a lot of times people just don't even realize that they need the mirror to be put in front of them. So this might be a hard wake-up call for some of y'all. And do not feel shame and guilt around this. As someone who is a recovering person from a victim mentality and mindset, you do not have to feel shame for this. You can overcome this. You can literally push that to the side and declare, I no longer want to be like this. And the first person that I thought about to help us navigate this conversation is my good friend Liz. She is a friend of mine online. I believe I found her from my sister. And honestly, it was like an immediate connection. She truly is a breath of fresh air, and her life experiences up until this point, which she is only 24. I was actually shocked to learn
That's
that this
insane,
morning.
by the way.
Yeah, literally shocked, but so incredible that she has taken this radical authority over her life to be like, I no longer resonate with this victim mindset. Her story is absolutely incredible. And, while this episode is not to be here for her story, she does have an incredible highlight on her Instagram at Lizbeth Rising called My Story. And this is just would be a great thing for you to go back on and just to hear her message because it's absolutely incredible. When we were doing the research for this episode, we realized that Liz has this amalgam of both my own experiences, but also with Amanda. For me, it was the journey to sobriety and having that spiritual awakening. And also with Liz, she had that with her weed, nicotine, caffeine addiction and overcame that, but also through a spiritual awakening with mushrooms. So that's something else that was just this mixture of both of us. And, but yeah, I just want to take it from there. And Liz, thank you again for being here. You are absolutely beautiful. I mean that in the best way possible by saying I was shocked that you were so young. You just have so much wisdom and hold yourself in a way that most mature adults don't. So as someone whose brain hasn't even fully formed yet, I commend you for taking the steps to radically change your life in a way that is clearly best serving you. So thank you again.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the beautiful intro. Yeah, hopefully that doesn't, create a block for people knowing I'm 24. I like to keep that a little hush hush, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I've always just kind of been an old soul, been hanging around with people much older than me since I was very young and been exposed to a lot and experienced a lot. So it's been a long, short journey for me, but definitely excited to be here.
Yeah. I do want to know from when you finally did take this radical change to quit your addictions and throw that to the wayside and finally be done. Where do you feel like you realized that you were living in a victim mindset and a mentality? What was the trigger that made you realize, okay, I am in a loop that I'm creating for myself?
Yeah, a lot of that stems from childhood, just the way I was raised. My father was a bit abusive growing up, not a bit. I'm, softening the blow because I love him and I've done a lot of forgiveness, but my culture, we're Slavic immigrants and love is very hard to come by, or at least affectionate love. Let's just say that. And a lot of people are dealing with unresolved anger issues, unresolved, inability to handle stress, immaturity. They were living in survival. So they really didn't have time to do much self-reflection, to do much inner work, none of that. Right. And so growing up, I was the eldest daughter. And my parents, we moved here when I was 6 months old and he was just trying to, provide and constantly in this stress state. He got laid off in '07 or '08, whatever, when I was 7 or 8. And that's really when our relationship hit a low because he was home. My mom was trying to become a nurse. So she was studying, super stressed out. So basically, just two immature, stressed out parents who didn't get a chance to even be children or, like they just jumped into adulthood, jumped into parenthood too early. And then I was just the trigger and the target for all of their anger and issues. And there was no one around to kind of spread it out. I didn't have a sibling until I was 7. So I was basically an only child. So everything kind of went targeted at me. And again, have done a lot of the forgiveness work, mainly seeing my dad change with my younger sister was really forgiving because I recognize at least he sees that what he did was not the best way by going and he didn't, apologies and things like that are still like hard to come by, but that's okay. So really I lived in victim mentality from my abuse for a long time and I carried it energetically. I gained weight in my early teens, like heavy, like I went from being, my last year of middle school in 8th grade, I was like 115 to by the end of freshman year of high school when I went homeschooled because I was kind of just, insecure, not fitting in with the girls, wanted to kind of whatever figure myself out. I had gained, like 60, 70 pounds in 1 year, just, and that's when really addiction started to creep in. And it wasn't with substances right away because I was 14. I didn't really have access to that stuff yet. It actually started with food and honestly with pornography and masturbation. Maybe it's the Scorpio in me with the lessons with the sex, death, and rebirth, but that's, one that's less common for girls. But for me, it was dopamine. I was in such a depleted state of dopamine being in this toxic environment that I started to just do whatever would make me feel good. And then the older I got, the more access I got to other substances. That's when it just kind of opened up. And so, yeah, when I started really trying actively to quit, which it was a long, long, arduous process, it took probably 3 or like 4 years out of the 6 or 7 that I was using to like actually succeed. I was relapsing constantly. I had a whole year clean off nicotine, but then still fell back in, so a lot of work, a lot of growth in between, but that was kind of where I had to face like, where am I still holding on to this idea that, I've just that I'm, poor me, like, oh, I was wounded. Well, I had all this damage done to me, and all this stuff. And, that again, I was carrying in my weight with that protection mechanism of like not feeling secure, not feeling safe, not feeling worthy. So yeah, really started with that. And then other aspects, like when I got into my relationship with my now husband, started to trigger certain things. He had a beautiful family life and his family actually triggered me a lot. And I started nitpicking them and, trying to find flaws in them because I'm like, well, they're too good to be true. And when I did find the flaws, it became easier to accept them because I was like, okay, well, we're all kind of messed up. So I feel a little better. But really like other aspects of that. And he was my mirror. So the sides of me that would come out of like, well, when I was little, or when I was a kid and I would really like project my wounds from my father onto him. And he's like, I'm not your dad. So this mirror of having that partner, really, he made me face a lot of that. So that was really when my addiction recovery accelerated. I was trying even before him, but not super seriously, just kind of loosely with it. And then when I got with him, we were both smoking weed all the time and I was trying to quit, and trying to make him do it with me. And, so there was a lot of that, but he was my mirror and that's what really accelerated the shift in me.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot, the mirror. It wasn't until I honestly went to rehab myself where I had the mirror. I was like, oh my gosh, wait, everyone is going through their own shit. It's not just me. Weird. And it took me honestly probably like 5 or 6 years later to really realize that I was perpetuating the shit that was happening to me by wanting to be a victim. I honestly think for me, I kind of like manifested shattering my leg, manifested being bedridden for a year, and that's like a really hard pill to swallow. But I do see all the connections and why things had to happen the way, going through your highlight about your story, like I see all the things and why they had to happen the way that it did for you to get to where you're at. When you have the 30,000 foot view, it's easy for you to see that, especially when you get out of the victim mindset. You're like, okay, well, I don't feel shame and guilt for living in that victim mindset because everything I did brought me to the point where I'm at now. But yeah, it's one way or another. Someone is going to mirror that to you, and it's probably going to be someone that you're either stuck with. Like I was stuck in rehab for 45 days. I was forced to have the mirror put in front of me. But for you, like you loved this person. You're like, all right, I'm not going to just like throw this to the wayside just because like you're triggering some like real shit that's coming out for me.
I wanted to. I was a runner, and not because I didn't love him, but because of how
It
much
made you
work it
feel.
required to be together. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
huge thing, and it always made him, because he was never the runner. He was the stable, like, no, we're making this work. And I so badly needed him to be solid in that. But I love what you're saying about, hindsight is 2020. And that's what anybody in victim mentality really needs to understand, is that there is another side to it. You get over the bridge, and when you look back, you can see how every step got you across, right? And it's like the health stuff is a huge trigger for a lot of people. A lot. I mean, the amount of people I have heard say cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me, or this disease or this illness was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it triggered me to face my shadow, to do the inner work. My father-in-law, my husband's dad, he had his appendix taken out, like it burst or something. He had some health stuff go on, and he was already a spiritual guy, Christian. He was a pastor, but it wasn't until that experience that his health really took a toll. Like, he just started having really bad flare ups, inflammation. He hasn't been able to eat the same food, but he started eating super organically, cutting out all the processed food. Like, he was already fairly clean, but they got on it. He got passionate about getting back into farming. He's an Indiana farmer from back in the day, moved to SoCal, and then they moved to North Carolina, now starting a homestead, 40 acres. Not a homestead so much. He's actually trying to do a farm co-op, because he's a starter. He's like what is that? A startup guy, He's got the drive. And so these series of events have led him into reigniting this passion of sharing his farming skills. And he's growing organic corn. He's feeding like these, pigs, and like getting the most solid like meat, And so it's just beautiful to see how it's trickled. But not only that, he's 71, I think now, and he is getting into meditation and into self-reflection as someone who is like super Christian pastor, like very, often had been closed-minded, who's very into like fear mentality, into, prepping for the end of the world. And now he's just like, let me like question where every one of my beliefs comes from. And he's healing the wounds with his children. It's just been beautiful. And I watch him and I admire him so much that at that age, he was willing and able to do that. But it took this health problem to trigger all of it. It takes that level, and it was building probably for years. And that's another thing, is like, when people get out of victim mentality, what happens is you become very sensitized to things going wrong in your field. So when you're in it, you have a tolerance to negative things happening to you. So it takes more and more, because you're not listening to the triggers. You're not like, what? Because you're not going inward. You're like thinking, oh, why is this happening to me? What is going on the outside? My life sucks. This person sucks. This situation sucks. Instead of being like, what is this showing me about myself? And until you do that, it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it manifests into something, some kind of illness, disease. And when you learn to reflect, dude, I get the most minor hiccup in my day, and I'm like, pause. What am I doing, God? Going within, show me what can I do better? Do I need to slow down? Do I need to face? It takes the most minor inconvenience now to get me to just do reflection. So I no longer like need those really big, propulsions towards that. It's just like a little drop of something, just any little thing. And so it's really cool to see how you don't need that. That's not the case for everyone. And that's why some people do need it and some don't. Some are more stubborn, right? Some might need that, little life altering experience to really get them to slow down. And then others, again, have become a little more sensitized or just never needed that. So everyone's different. But that's why, why did I need the cancer in order to wake up? It's like, just don't sit there. People can just turn anything into a reason to be a victim. But it isn't until you stop that mentality that you can start to release yourself from that need. You'll no longer need it as much.
Well, that's called the victim identity loop. It is a loop from thought, emotion, behavior, proof, back to thought. And I watch it all day, every day in my field, on the internet, because we have access to so many different people. It is wild. And I watch these people that continue to stay in situations and lives that they hate, and that they constantly are attracting these horrible things. And it's the way, oh my God, you know what? I got a message actually yesterday, and I'm going to keep this as vague as possible, but I feel like this is really good timing to leeway into this specifically, because for me, when people come to me with these kind of questions and what they're asking me, I can pick up on why they're still stuck in the loop immediately. And I figured this would be fun for us all to decode it together because we come from such different circumstances, understandings, and all of those things. But this is literally perfect. And it's funny because ironically, full moons bring this out in people. I don't know what it is, but it's been actually a crazy week when it comes to stuff like this. But she says, and this was a random message, I haven't talked to her in a while. How do you continue to show up when shit in life is not good? We keep having life situations, losing employment, having to move with nowhere to go, finding out I'm expecting. I always have so much stress. I have to take care of our children, have to try and work. I never feel settled. This has been the norm for like a year now. My body suffers and I have chronic pain. I'm sure my cortisol levels are out of this world, and I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I have always wanted to do well with blank, but feel like everything in life is a roadblock. How do you do it? How have you built what you have? I know not everyone's situation is the same, but I just want to do well and I feel like I can't. How did that make you? Really quick, I want to know, how did that make everybody feel?
I mean, just it's like it's obvious, to me, like you're saying, it's so obvious when someone is in that state. They can't see it though. So no judgment
Mm-mm.
at all,
No,
because
none.
when you're in it, like a lot of these people also attract the people that affirm. They want they give them
And
the
the
pity.
situation.
Misery loves company.
I love that you're a projector, Amanda, because she just gave you this invitation, this beautiful, like, hey, how do you. And so you're getting the opportunity to give her an answer that she will actually receive because she invited you in. Otherwise, if you had said something on your own, it would have bounced right off, right? But you got the invitation. So that's a beautiful opportunity and a way that God uses each.
And you know what? You're saying that, and I'm going, I should have been more receptive. Where for me, I will say I'm so far removed from that mindset, that understanding, that attracting of things, that when I really sit and think about it, I almost don't know how, unless I'm working one-on-one with somebody and diving deep with them at a one-on-one level. But doing it at such a like surface level is not something I've ever done well with, for the most part, because it isn't a surface level answer. It's so much complexity here to unpack. I can see where childhood trauma and an identity of illusion all fall into place right here. And the continuous loop, it literally is the thought, emotion, behavior, proof, back to thought loop. It's a continued loop. And it's just like, if you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, you will always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Period. You will not get
That
it.
frame of mind is
Yes.
textbook victim mentality. I remember telling my dad once when I was knee deep in my addiction and all my surgeries, I was like, Dad, I just feel like I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. And my dad was like, why are you living your life like that? What?
Yeah.
Because for me, good things were always met with something bad. Because that was a self-sabotage tendency, because I was expecting something bad to happen. And what do you know? It happened. So for this person that sent you this message, she's word cursing her whole self in that whole thing.
Mhm.
Everything was negative, low vibes. Everything was, this is happening to me. I can't change. And so she's further placing that over herself. Again, no judgment, but a lot of times people
No.
don't even realize what they're doing. Like the very first time I started working with my coach, we didn't spend the entire call on this because she was like, you're already pretty there. But most times when I start working with someone, we spend 1 to 2 calls working on this language that we speak about ourselves and how we communicate. A lot of times we are placing us in a perpetual loop by the way we speak, and we don't even realize it.
Mhm.
And
Well,
so
there is so important because we mirror that to each other. When it's just in your mind, it can be so easy to just like not notice. But when you hear yourself say it out loud, and especially if the other person can be a healthy mirror, like, hey, this is hard to hear, but I'm realizing a lot of negative language. That's what's beautiful. And I love, Carter, how you were saying you were always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then it did, right? Look at your mindset and where you've gotten to. So I feel like it's like the wounded healer, right? It's like the people who struggle with it the worst end up becoming the greatest teachers at getting out of it, because then they have to go through the hero's journey of figuring out overcome it. And now every day it's the best day ever, right? And I love that. And I follow your sister who does it too. And I'm sure you have even more followers who you have influenced and inspired so many people to the point where you're starting a
She has.
podcast. Right, right. And so it's like, man, thank God that you were sitting there in that victim mentality for a while. And like, for this woman, maybe coaching or talking, hearing yourself communicate, like you're saying, maybe deeper work is what's necessary. Having a mirror sometimes, if your husband or your friends are just going to be that toxic mirror back to you and they're just going to sit and complain, then people need to like broaden their circle and seek more, I mean, obviously you can, if you're in tune enough, you don't always need another. It can be an internal process. God alone you can just do it with God, but it's just so helpful to have that, and it accelerates you, right? Like I said with my husband, like you had your 45 days, like that's speeding through it, right? Like just facing it every single day. My husband has gone through rehab and he had that similar experience too, and like I know how those uncomfortable moments are really what's going to push you to sit and reflect, and sometimes I'm like, man, maybe you need to go. Not really, but like, just like maybe because he does not like to sit with himself at all. And sometimes you have to be forced. And I'm like, you do so well when you're forced to look at yourself. He's like, I know you don't like it, but you like thrive and you do amazing, And he was he was just like such a better, just more aware and in tune and present with himself. And then when you go back to just like, just day to day, and I think men are struggling with this more, but women are a little bit more internal and less externally focused. And so maybe it's a little easier for us. But also, men don't struggle with victim mentality like women do. I think it's a huge thing for women, particularly. And like I inherited it from my mother. My mother was a victim in a lot of what she did. What was me, this and that, pity me. It's like, it's how they get
Martyr.
attention too, right? The martyr, exactly, the martyr. It's how they get attention. And I can see it in my grandmother. It's definitely not your burden to carry, right? It's like, we don't have to, that's why we don't have to sit in the shame and the guilt, because we inherited a lot of this. We inherited, it's what's been mirrored to us since we were children. Oh, something bad happens to me, I have to sit there and cry and pout until somebody gives me some kind of attention, even if it's not like the attention you really want to receive, it's attention, right? And so we like train our minds that, well, any attention is better than nothing. And so I'm going to constantly sit and dwell, And it's like you're saying, Amanda, I'm so detached that like I made a new friend online not long ago and we were chatting back and forth. And I started picking up victim mentality of like, I want new mom friends, but I live in a place where there's nobody who gets me. And I'm like, girl, why are you saying that? You don't know who's out there. You don't know who's waiting for you right around the corner. You are putting limits on God. Like you are putting limits on divine intervention to come to you, because God's not going to impose on your free will. If you've created a block with your belief system, he's not going to, until you let that come down, he's not going to, break through that. Like he wants you to figure it out for yourself. And it's just this like, oh, I want new friends. Oh, but I don't even want to be here in this state, but we're too poor, And it's like, it's just too much. Like, it's just all victim mentality. And it's hard for me to not just be straightforward. Like, I want to empathize with you, but by doing so, I am feeding into your delusions that you are not this magnetic, amazing, beautiful, energetic, divine child of God. Like, I can't do that. I cannot sit there and affirm your negative beliefs in yourself,
Yeah.
So I get just not knowing exactly how to like go about this, and how, like, what do you recommend to these people? How it's like, really, it is almost like you have to let God do the work and usher the triggers, and all you can do is just keep shining your light and hope that they keep asking the right questions and getting there.
Well, what I would tell this mom, and say this is you, if you're listening and you feel that same way, you're like, wow, I've said that exact thing. What I would tell you to do to try and overcome that is start visualizing play dates with your kids. Start visualizing going doing these things with all the friends that you have, because the power of that, you're creating that in your mind, which is eventually going to be created in your reality. So if you are open to getting out of this mindset, it's one little change that you have to make, one little thing for you to change. So that's what I would tell that mom, is be like, okay, you think that, well, you've opened the door for me to give you advice if you're talking to me about this, okay? And I'm going to try and be as nice as I can, but this is what I would do if I felt like I was there and I have this mindset. So instead of thinking, woe is me, I would then think, yeah, okay, I'm going to start visualizing this, because there is so much power in that. And all the research that I've been doing and this quote unquote idea of manifestation, well, a lot of times people come to this conclusion that they're manifesting and they don't even realize that's what they're doing. It's like the woman who has won every single, lottery thing that she's ever entered in. She was like, I signed up for it. I visualized myself winning, imagined how that felt, and then let it go. And then she won every single thing. And so it's like, it's as easy as that. So that's what I would say. I was just
I
trying to
want to
give
recommend
advice
too.
to people.
I feel like in this situation, if anyone has time to read or listen to audiobooks, The Biology of Belief is so good because it really talks, I mean, it fully encompasses what we're talking about today in every form, but it talks about, there's a lot of misinformation. A lot of people think things are genetic and blah, 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 blah. It's like you said, Liz, it's passed down. I mean, it is generational trauma in its truest form, and how our belief creates our reality and the biology and science behind how it works. And it's really neat because for me, when I hear that, how do you show up when shit is hard? Here's the thing. We have this innate power given by God to create hell on earth or heaven on earth. And it's totally up to us. And I remember feeling like I was living hell on earth. I've been there. I think we all have. But once we understood the power that we held within us, we were able to completely flip the script, change the narrative, and create the reality we wanted. And that starts from understanding that your thought patterns, your belief systems, and the word spells you put on yourself are what keeps you stuck in this loop. And we've both, Carter and I, have watched a video saying, if you continue this belief system, once you hit 50, if you're still there, it's almost impossible to get out of it. I mean, it's not impossible, but it is like to rewire your brain that late in your life is very difficult.
It's like trying to learn a language later in life like that. It's much easier when you're younger, but later.
Yeah. That's why I was so impressed with my father-in-law, because he's like doing the work at that age, where my grandparents are the same age as he is, but again, have not had that ability and that time and that reflection of just like sitting with yourself and focusing. But I love that what we're basically all saying is you're always manifesting, but you're either doing it unconsciously or consciously. And then you're always going to have consequences for every action and thought you think, but you get to choose whether those consequences are positive or negative, right? At the end of the day, gratitude is your weapon. Like, I don't like to think in terms of like, fighting, but like gratitude is your weapon towards jealousy. Gratitude is your weapon towards victim mentality. Gratitude is your weapon towards any sort of perceived negative experience. Because if you can hold the gratitude, then it really does pass. It passed every negative season of life will always come to that. Hell always clears over, and then you see heaven more clearly than you ever have before. And it's because, if you can maintain that state of gratitude through that process, it becomes easier. But I will be honest, like, it's not easier to stay in victim mentality. It truly isn't. That's the thing, is like people think like it's hard. And sure, it's uncomfortable, and you have to be humble. You have to face that you might be making the wrong, mistakes. You might not be doing the right things for you and living in alignment with how God wants you to live. And that's, not easy, but it is harder to just continue and perpetuate the cycle. And there are so many times, like I said, my husband is my greatest mirror. And there are so many times when we'll get in an argument or a pretty big fight, and we'll like take that time to like separate for a little bit, and I'll finally get a chance to just sit with myself. And I'm always like, okay, well, I know I'm not a victim, so how am I gonna without victimizing myself? Because that was so big for us in the beginning of our relationship. I was always the victim. I was always making myself this small, poor little wounded bird, and he was just this bad guy, which was not the case, but that's how I was painting him out to be because of all my past wounds, and he was just accidentally, unintentionally triggering that. And so now it's gotten to the place where that's my immediate, like, I have learned the language of, even though, I am lucky enough to be doing this in my 20s, and again, it is going to be, a little bit more challenging the older you get, but not impossible. But now I'm able to just immediately go to that place of like, okay, well, I'm not a victim. So how are we gonna mend this? How are we gonna figure this out? What is the lesson here for me? Because sure, it's not always just one-sided, but there's always something you can do to be better, even if it's just an opportunity to forgive. That's the other thing, is like, even if it's just a chance for you to practice forgiveness, compassion, love. It can be as simple as that, right? Somebody hurting you, I have unintentionally hurt people and they have forgiven me. So here's my chance to pay it forward. It can be as simple as that, right? So yeah, it's not easier to live in victim mentality, It
You
really
want to know?
just
You want to know what's crazy? Is this has me thinking of like all the people I know that instead of taking any kind of responsibility for anything, they use their past, their traumas, things like that to make the excuses for
Justify.
justifying their situations. And you know what's crazy? When I really step back and I look at everybody I know in that situation, they are living their version of hell. And watching it from a place of perception is such a wild standpoint to be in when, hey, I've been there, you get it, but you try to help. And instead it's met with like this insane resistance. And you're like, I don't know how to help anymore. And so you're just watching things play out. And you're like, if they only really just understood and grasped the concept of like, you're keeping yourself in this loop, everything would absolutely change for you. And it's like, how many times do I have to say it or try to help aid in it for you to understand? And at what point are you like, I can no longer help? I've tried everything. But it is crazy to watch, like when you're outside of it and you're looking at all the different realities for all the different people. It's crazy. I'm constantly looking around going, I live in a different dimension than most people. I feel like a lot of us do. I think we really started recognizing that in 2020. We were like, wow, we're all just living in different realities. And some are living in a reality based off anxiety and fear, while the others it's the exact opposite. This is the same thing. I mean, once you realize and can take that radical responsibility that like you are keeping yourself stuck in this loop, it will change your reality. It's just,
I was thinking back about when I was living in that and when I so deeply dug into the victim mentality and why. So I was like 24, 25, had no outlook on life. I went to college in 2008 when the recession happened. And, no one was hiring by the time I came out. And I was working in PR and social media. And I could not keep a job because I was a victim. It didn't like feel, I don't know. It just, this was the beginning of my addiction. And when I realized that I realized this before this, that surgeries caused me to be in this victim mindset. Like it was to this point where I think my parents felt bad that this was happening to me, that I kept on injuring myself over and over. And so we would go shopping when I would have to have a surgery. And now looking back, I'm like, that is so twisted. But again, like they probably felt bad because what I threw in their face all during my addiction was I wanted to stop playing basketball and y'all never let me. And now I'm addicted to painkillers. Like, and it's your fault. That's where I was. And then, I'm knee deep in addiction. I'm told by this crazy doctor that I have a misaligned femur and the only way to fix it is to have a surgery to realign it. Where my parents' massage therapist at the time was like, I believe I can fix this without surgery. And I remember being like, oh, hell no, I want the surgery. I want to feel like a victim. I want people to be like, oh, condolences, here's flowers. Are you okay? I wanted to feel like that. I was in no way ever going to allow what she said to fix me. And I was like, there's no way that I am not going to have this surgery because A, I want to continue to have painkillers. I want to keep on getting the prescription for sure. And B, I like the way that people have to wait on me hand and foot. I literally was bedridden and got to the point where people were waiting on me hand and foot. And I think about that dynamic with my mom. I'm like, wow, like she literally was so selfless that she served me every single meal for months on end in a bed. Her 25-year-old daughter, unemployed, addicted to painkillers, and she was selflessly serving me, at least to my face. I don't know what she was doing behind the scenes because I probably would have been like pulling my hair out and being like, God, why? But I mean, hopefully she saw the lesson for it was for her. But again, I created that reality. And that looking back, I'm like, I wanted to be that victim. And another thing I wanted to mention too, to get into the sciencey thing, is the what is it? Reticulating activating system, RES, whatever.
Recticular.
Thank you. Whatever. If you are living in that victim mindset, your mind will only filter opportunities for you to feel like a victim. So you're like, oh, well, all these things keep on happening to me. No, there's 70 million things happening to you all at once, but your brain is only processing 30 to 40 things of those at once. So there's probably a lot of good things happening around you, but your brain is not going to show you those things because it's programmed not to. And so that's why it's just taking one step to change something, and it will snowball into other things.
Wow, I need to learn more about that because and I wrote down the book, the Biology of Belief, because truly it's coming down to like any spiritual work, any work you want to do, it comes down to that. I was just at a wedding this weekend talking to my husband's dad's best friend. So my father-in-law's best friend. And I'm pretty sure he's a projector because he's just in human design. He was just sitting there and I'm talking with my sister and she's saying that she's trying to get into sales. And I look and I'm like, wait, Pat did like solar sales. uh, like, you did sales, right? Do you have any advice for like my little sister? And as soon as I gave him the invitation, he just unloaded just all this wealth of wisdom. And I'm like, and he's just totally a seer, and I'm like, wow, after 40 years of doing sales, one thing that I really learned is that people make all of their decisions in life based on two things, faith or fear. And he's like, that's it. That's all it is. And that really is belief at the end of the day. What's the underlying thing? What you're believing about a situation? Are you afraid of something bad happening? That's all mental. That's all in the mind. And like what you were saying, Amanda, earlier about how, you get frustrated because I really see your projectorness in you and like relate to that so much where you can tell people things because even Pat, why I assume he's a projector, he said something. He said, I've been telling Tom, my father in law, for years, his best friend, he needs to do this. And it didn't take, it took him getting his appendix. But I'm like, you know what? He probably wasn't giving Pat the invitation. And so he was just, projecting, giving him all the advice because projectors can see things. But until we're invited, that it just bounces off of people. And so I've experienced that and you get bitter about it. You're like, oh my God, I've known for years. And so as we're talking, like that next step, I really, something that's been coming up for me in my little group that I'm doing with my girls is who are you, right? And like, I don't like to identify with things in this world too much. Like, I don't like to cling too tightly. Like, oh, I'm a Scorpio, I'm a woman, I'm a Slavic, I'm this, I'm Californian. All these, like, these are all temporary identities. At the end of the day, who I am is a divine child of God. That's like who I always go back to my core. But it can be so helpful to understand your design, understand the mapping, the blueprint of who you are. And I wonder if that might be a good first step for people to just look into why they might be the way they are, because it can help you understand why you're different from other people. It can help you understand why you might operate or look differently from other people, right? It's like I probably would have been still in victim mindset had I not learned that, oh, I'm a projector and I have this special set of gifting, but I have to like kind of use it in the right way. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it doesn't work out
It
well,
doesn't
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe, looking into the blueprint and the makeup of who you are can be very helpful. But, Carter, what you were saying about your surgery, I think is such a profound, vulnerable thing to come clean about in a sense. Not that you need to feel any shame or guilt, but just to admit that to yourself and then to others is so raw of you. And I really love that. And I appreciate that you did that. And honestly, your generation really went through it with the opioids and the painkillers. I had a really close friend who had a similar experience, had back problems doing flooring for years, was prescribed by a doctor, what is it, Vicodin, addicted to pills for years and years, then eventually got onto meth and heroin, ended up getting a pacemaker in his heart, but could not quit drinking, smoking, even doing other like, cocaine, and ended up dying before he was even 30. And he knew other friends of his before he passed that also had similar with the painkillers. So it's like part of it was obviously like, your own. I think things like that, when they happen to a specific generation, it's like, it's a collective thing that you guys needed to undergo. Cause again, not being victims of the system, that they gave me the prescription. That's where you can really fall into that again, right? But right now we're seeing like collectively, a lot of new parents are choosing to bed share, are choosing to not do the cry it out method. Like my best friend, I was just talking to her the other day. Her first two kids, She did not bed share. She did the cried out. Like now she's like my third baby. I really want her in my bed and I'm having to like do this whole learning curve. And I'm like, isn't it fascinating that collectively we're all kind of deciding like this is what our children actually need and we're going to give them that even if we didn't do it before. And maybe what like the last generation missed was that ability to be a baby and like realizing that these kids, even if they're 6, they're still little, even if they're but we have this pressure put onto us at such a young age that now a lot of us are actually staying immature and underdeveloped because we didn't get to like. So it's just really cool to see how when collective things like that happen and you're not alone on your journey, even though you might have felt like it, maybe you didn't know people personally who were also experiencing the injuries and the addiction to the pills and stuff. It was a big thing at that time for a reason though, probably, who knows how it really ultimately served the collective. So it's really cool to see that. And I think a great place for people is just understanding their life path, maybe again, like astrology, human design, however, like you want to look into it, maybe just your Enneagram, just different things like that. But understanding, how you operate in this world so that you can better understand who you are and accept who you are. And then that allows you to be more confident and more loving towards yourself. Also, I think a really big one for people is trying to find synchronicities, right? Like, because when you're open to them, they are everywhere. It's when you're
Everywhere.
closed minded so that you see it's the best day ever, right? Like that is a synchronistic mindset because you are just attracting affirmations that this is the best day ever. And when you see that small little bumblebee fly by or that little bird that's hanging out or just anything little, like a little note, a little smile somewhere, you're like, hey, God, I see you, I feel you. You are here with me. How can I be a victim if the creator is surrounding me and encompassing me with all these signs of love and affection? I think that's like maybe I feel like if I were to go back to my spiritual journey, the very beginning, I feel like those would be the things that I would recommend to like pass me like, hey, look into your design and your makeup and who you are, and then maybe some of the people around you so you can see how you might differ, how you might, and then also just the synchronicity, just pay attention, notice the things. And I was pretty big on that, but I know a lot of people just rationalize everything. Oh, that was coincidence. Oh, what, or they just are not looking for it because they're too blinded by all, because what you were saying about how if your input is just all you're looking for that negative stuff everywhere you go. So maybe like, praying, hey, God, I want to get out of victim mentality. Show me some little signs throughout my days. I'm going to do my best to be open to receiving the love and the joy and be grateful. And then when they do see those synchronicities, to sit and relish with them, to pause, stop what you're doing, take a picture, write it down, post it on your Instagram, whatever it is, but to just like relish in that. And that will naturally raise your vibration and retrain your mind to starting to recognize it everywhere. It's all around you, the beauty and the love and your deservingness, your worthiness.
Yes.
I want to say, just because I know this isn't getting off topic, but I feel like this is a beneficial topic, if you will. Because we talk about signs and synchronicities and all those things all the time. But I will say there is also at the same time a very large collective who demonizes them. And it's crazy because I'm like, how? Why? And I have to, kind of pivot this question really to you, Liz, because I looked at your Instagram and we have very similar understandings and belief systems on everything, very similar upbringings, things like that. I am at a place where I'm like, how do I help people understand that they're demonizing the wrong things? That these signs and synchronicities are here, that you cannot only find them through the Bible or through church. We have got God, the creator of the entire universe, is not going to put just the signs and messages in one book. That's not how this works. And so I have to ask, because I know a lot of our listeners are probably hear some of this stuff and there's automatic resistance and pushback based off of what they've been brought up to think and feel. And I want to create more of an open-minded invitation to receive these signs and messages from God without automatically thinking they're not of God. How would you
Yeah,
piggyback off of that?
that's a great question, and honestly, I like never thought it through, but what came up for me was possibly the fact that maybe they don't see the signs. And so when they hear about that, like you guys follow Rose Uncharted, right? The
Mhm.
big Instagram influencer. So what I noticed and what I kind of felt when she started posting more about reclaiming, feminine spirituality and things like that, there was so much resistance, let's just say,
So
right?
much. Yeah.
Resistance. And what I felt was like, I wonder, because, the way that Rose transmits her messages is not, it's kind of, under the surface. It's not blatantly clear, and she does it in kind of this mystical way. And so for people who are not ready or don't already understand what she's talking about, it's like, what are you saying? And that's the vibe I felt, was just confusion and not really getting it,
People
right?
ask me if she's starting a cult. I'm like, "No, she went
Yeah,
through an awakening."
yeah,
She's just
yeah.
relaying it with how her awakening played out.
Well, the thing is so I was one of her subscribers, so she shared a bunch of this. She looked into her birth chart, and her birth chart basically says she's elusive, that she is mysterious. And like, instead of fighting that feeling that she was feeling within herself, she goes, you know what? I'm going to step into that because clearly
Yeah,
God designed me to be that way. So I
right.
kind of like applaud her for staying true to who she is and just stepping into that, but keep on
Mhm.
going.
Exactly. And so, and I saw the same thing because I was part of that same group. And I was like, yeah, like that makes sense. And that helps me have more compassion for her, which is why it's helpful to look into these things, because I'm like, oh, well, like, this was with me and my husband. We were so different that if I didn't understand that he was, an Aries with this and that dynamic, and how that might play out with one another, I would have given up ages ago, honestly. But now I'm like, no, like this is God's design for him. And, this isn't like him against me, him trying to purposely do things, him intentionally. This is how he operates, and this is how I operate. And we have to find ways to mend that beautifully, right? And so with Rose, it is really beautiful when you can like accept that and just lean into it. But what I saw with a lot of those people was just confusion and not getting it. They didn't get it, right? They felt left out almost. And they're reading the comments and they're like seeing other people who do get it. And they're like, oh my God, like they must be brainwashed, or they have to immediately attack it. They
Demon
have to,
possessed.
They're possessed. I
yeah,
hear that
That
one.
was shocking to
they
me.
get defensive because they feel left out. Because, oh, it's not as like, oh, her old conspiracy theories of the government and this and that, right? Which like everyone loves that kind of stuff, and like everyone can kind of get by that. But when you start going to the religious conspiracy theories, that's when people get defensive, because your spiritual identity is something that you cling to beyond your political identity, the way you eat, the way you dress, what you do for work. All of those other systems are minor compared to spiritual identity and spiritual systems. So religious authority has, the corruption within religion has seeped its way into all of these other systems. And when you go towards religion, I mean, people get offended that you might have
Literally.
a different view of Jesus, of God, than you do, because they're so deeply ingrained in that identity of, I am a Christian, I am this, and this is how I know that looks like. And if you don't match that, then you can't be it with me. And, which is why I have a hard time identifying with being, because I know it looks different. And so I don't take that label, because people have a expectation. Oh, if you're a Christian, well, that mean you believe ABC. And I'm like, not
Mhm.
necessarily. To me, Christian just means follower of Jesus. But anyhow, so
Follower
I
of Christ, like,
follow of Christ, exactly. So to me, what I feel like people who demonize the signs and the synchronicities might just not be seeing them. I don't know, because when you
well,
see
I
them, you
think it's
feel the
you
love.
close yourself off when you
There's a
are
veil.
you create a resistance and become non-receptive. And it is crazy to me because I
Yeah.
question it when I see it, to hopefully create the conversation and understand. Because for me, I like to understand it from your level. But when I'm met with, well, I don't ask questions, you're smarter than me, or well, I don't know, I just have faith. And, instead of like that deep understanding and questioning, and I think we were not designed with flaws. We were designed to ask and think the way we do for certain reasons. And I loved one of your stories in your like bio about me highlight because I loved that you've been to so many different places. You've gotten to experience the religions and the cultures and things like that. And, for everybody just to, without a shadow of a doubt, believe their belief system is so correct because of where they were born. It is a generational indoctrination, and religion is man-made and is made by ego. And ego only, just like our politician system. And it's all stemming from the same place and the same people to create the same structures and the same hierarchical forum. And so if people can have this innate understanding that us three have developed, a lot of people collectively are also going through, we're watching an awakening. And I'm watching two sides of an awakening right now. I'm seeing extreme resistance, and I'm seeing people be like, oh, wait. Okay. And then there's others who are just radically thrown into it. For me, it's wild to watch because I've been in it for a decade. And so it's been very lonely. But to watch it now play out, I was actually going somewhere, and then my brain decided to completely forget.
Well, what I was thinking is what you made me think of with people having so much resistance and
Yes.
clinging and being closed and comfortable, right? They're in a state of comfort. It can be scary to question your religion. I just made a video about it that a lot of people are resonating with, that when you leave the confines of religion, you are now left with everything being open. And that's what they tell you. Oh, don't open too many doors because then, that's
Yep.
when, the enemy creeps in or whatever. And so it's like, it is scary to not be as solid. Like, I just watched this beautiful podcast with this guy, Rhett. I forgot his last name, and with Alex O'Connor, who's like a famous atheist, and it was about his deconstruction journey. And I didn't finish the last couple minutes. I don't know if Rhett is.
Would you send that to us? I would love to
Yes,
see.
I would gladly, yes, I'll
Here.
send that. And it was a great podcast. But what really stood out to me was something Rhett said, which he said, I used to go to bed because he was an evangelical youth leader, like super deep in church, right? And then he started kind of being led to these questions that he didn't have answers to, and started researching and looking into things, right? And again, going down that path. That's what they want. They don't. But he said, I used to go to bed every night so grateful that I had the truth. Right. It was almost this like cockiness of like, oh, I have the one true. I am so lucky to really know what's up, And I honestly, in that moment, I had to do some self reflection where I'm like, sometimes I still do that. Sometimes I'm still like, oh, well, at least I'm further along than those Christians over there, who are still closed minded. So I try my best, not because truly I feel like you can find God within the context of religion as long as your perspective and your like what you absorb from the religion is the beauty, because there is a lot of beauty.
Well, and they use it to have that ability to then be the quick judge, be the one saying, oh, can't wait to see you burn in hell. Like the amount of times I saw that under Rose's stuff. And I'm just like, I said to Connor, I said, wow, there is no hate like Christian love. I said, that is why people run far.
They're not embodying Christ. And to me, I'm like, Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Like, that is not meekness. That is this arrogance of feeling like they have everything, and they have done none of the work to actually question and open themselves up and reflect. And here's what I often say is, if you tell God, hey, God, I have this Bible, I have your word, it's 100% immaculate, I've
accepted you in my heart, I'm going to heaven, I can do whatever I want. Yeah.
But it's like, God is not going to impose on your free will if that's your belief. If you believe you already have the immaculate word of God right here, okay. But how many Christians have actually stopped and been like, hey, God, is this your immaculate word? Is what is in this? Because who are you listening to? Your pastors, your preachers, your parents, all of these
And
people.
how do we disregard all the other religious texts, especially that are older than that book? You've got to look at, honestly, this could be a whole episode in and of itself. And this is a topic that Carter and I are very passionate about, but have been very, what is the word?
Strategic
on how to share it and incorporate it, because there's so much depth, there's so much layers, and people think believing in God and religion, specifically Southern Christians or Christians in the United States, have a very different belief system than Christians in Germany and then Christians all over the world. And it's just wild because the belief system is black or white. You believe in God and you abide by the Bible and you do this and you are going to heaven, you accept God, and you could do anything. You could be a serial killer as long as you've eventually accepted God. And then if you don't, even if you're the nicest human being in the world that literally doesn't do a single thing wrong, you are automatically born into sin for whatever reason. And then you are going to hell even though you've never done anything. You've never killed anybody. You've just done nothing but love, but you weren't given access to our Bible. So you're wrong.
And then what do they tell you the origin of sin is? Asking questions, seeking curiosity, seeking knowledge. That is the origin of sin. That one belief system is what keeps all Christians in line. All Abrahamic religions that share that origin story of Adam and Eve in the garden, they all have this underlying belief that look at all the suffering we are going through because our ancestors sought knowledge of good and evil, right?
Well, and my thing is like, how? When you have never been taught right from wrong, how do you know you're doing wrong?
Innocent. And yeah, if they literally did not know right from wrong, good from evil, how could they? I know. So there's so much fallacy in, and that's the thing, we're digressing, but it's like people who are unwilling to ask questions, just like people who are unwilling to shift from victim mentality and reflect like, hey, what am I doing? They will likely get shaken up. And I see it through maybe going through a divorce. Maybe you're so Christian and want to hold up the Bible so bad, but you happen to marry someone who you just do not feel aligned with anymore. But you don't want to break that good Christian teaching that you've been taught. You can't leave, you have to stick it out. And they break that and become humbled and raw and vulnerable and open and recognized. And like, I've seen that been a path for some women, on the journey. Like, another big person like Courtney Kalla, she was a chiropractor. She's friends with Rose. Like she, I think, went through a pretty major divorce, was her husband struggled with addiction. She stuck it out for years and years. And she was, Southern, Christian, pretty uptight from what I remember her sharing, and lately has been opening up a little bit, and it's not just that, obviously, another podcast I did, Spirit Outspoken, one of the co-hosts, her son got cancer at 5 years old or a couple years old. And that accelerated her because you get to these exits like when you really get faced with the questions of, God, like, why is this happening? And, everything I've been taught, but I've been a good Christian. I've been praying. Why am I? So it sometimes takes some, shaking up for people to actually start questioning. If things have been good, if just going to church has been serving you well and reading the Bible, and you're comfortable within the confines, something's going to come and rattle that to get you to start looking outward, not outward, but be more open, right?
And I've seen it on multiple different occasions where I'm watching just something about me. I can see things through I call it like a cone lens where I can see it all encompassing somebody's journey. And it's really cool to witness from this lens and perspective that I have. And I don't know whether it's due to having a near-death experience that I have this. I don't know if it's a gift. I don't know if everybody else has it, but I can see it. But one of the things that I recognize the most is those so stuck in that mentality, refusing to even ask a question when things are constantly going bad, which seems to be an odd pattern for those in this specific place. Instead of saying, you know what, maybe I should ask questions, they're saying, well, I've been delivered from this. This is the devil trying to disrupt to me. And I'm just like, you will see my followers by the fruits of their labor. Like, what? Let's work this out together. But it allows them to stay in that pattern of the loop. And
That's
it's
exactly
a
what I was
continuous
going to say.
loop. And I'm watching it play out and I'm like, okay.
Religion allows people to stay in a victim mindset because we are told
like a
that we are
comfort blanket.
broken. So, and that's the thing. We're so worried that people would just throw the baby out with the bathwater with what we share. Like, here's the thing. For me, my journey with God and evangelical Christianity, I have never once changed who I've prayed to. It's the same God every single time. But here I am on a completely different path than my neighbor. And I'm like, okay, well, God's telling me this. And because I'm asking for it. For me, I was like, okay, God, where else have I been deceived? If it's, big pharma, I've been hella deceived by that. Everything else, the world. And God led me to this. And that would be really twisted of God to be like, hey, God, I'm asking for discernment. and him be like, okay, let me throw you something and be like, hey, let's double down on this discernment that you're asking for and be like, hey, let's see if you really got that discernment. That is so twisted. And my God does not act like that. Would not be like, okay, she's asking for this, but let me like really throw her for a loop here. Like, that
She's
makes
asking
no sense to
questions.
me.
She's going to burn for eternity.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, but that's what I've realized is traditional Christianity, especially Americanized, is that it keeps you in that victim mindset, because I hear all the time, because I still go to church. Again, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I still enjoy worshiping a creator, the foundations of, some great biblical principles. But I'm telling you, there are some times where I'm like, ugh, I cringe when I hear some things in church, because they tell you over and over and over again that you're broken, that you're lacking, that you're missing something. And I'll tell you this, when I was knee deep in addiction, that in a relationship with, as a follower of Christianity, because I no longer identify myself as a Christian, because as someone who once identified as a Christian, I was the shittiest human being ever. But I'd be like, oh, but I said that prayer and I'm going to go to heaven. It's okay if I overdose and happen to get fentanyl in this fake pill, but at least I'll go to heaven. It doesn't matter if I treat everyone else like shit right now. But I'll tell you what, now on the other side of asking these questions, where else have I been deceived? Coming to this realization, I am way more a Christian today than I was when I called myself a Christian. And that is just the wildest paradox for me, to be like, okay, I more want to live by the fruits of the Spirit, live by what Jesus said. Now, having this understanding and this belief system that maybe traditional Christianity doesn't have it right. Maybe there's some handed down dogma and purposeful deviating you on the path where you're meant to be. Again, like you did this incredible reel that I watched this morning where, from Jesus to Paul, there was 20 years of time where people were following what Jesus said to do. And then Paul all of a sudden comes onto the scene, is like, hey, actually what y'all are doing is wrong. And that just is blowing my mind, where I can't imagine watching that happen. And I firmly believe that we are going to experience that in our lifetime, of this shift, where people are going to be like, okay, we are deceived here.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
Because I'm worried that, no, I'm not worried, actually. I know a lot of people will be like, why do you have new age thought processes? And I want to touch on that really quick, because I feel like a lot of people confuse what's outside of their book that they've been brought up on with new age. This information is ancient wisdom that far supersedes the Bible by thousands and thousands of years. It goes way beyond Christianity. It starts probably before any documentation that we have. The earliest documentation that we have is the pyramid texts. These are the same teachings in there that the ancient Egyptians understood. That is what we're saying. And a lot of people are confusing with a lot of the work in spiritual shifts that they're seeing with New Age. And it's not New Age. It's ancient wisdom being encoded back into us again. We didn't just develop these mindsets for no reason. I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know if you know what that is. That's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy, Mom, Dad, I love you so much. And they know me. My dad is also the kind of guy who he's like, you know what? I will read the Bible, but I'll also read the Quran, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita. I'll have the understanding. And, I respect his choice on beliefs based on the fact that he's somebody that doesn't just go, one book and one book only is true. They all have truth. And I said, well, at the end of the day, they all kind of say the exact same things, from the green emerald tablets to the ancient pyramid. Like, they're all worded slightly different because they're all translated differently through languages and things like that. And, we've just really, and again, we are getting so off original.
Yeah, we're going
topic,
off, but I love it though.
I do too. We were like, let's let this naturally flow. But Jesus spoke Aramaic. Aramaic was such a spiritual, incredible, beautiful language that I know nothing about, because we don't speak Aramaic. But what I do know about it is that a lot of main words used in the Bible can be translated so many different ways. And your version of how it's translated is based off of where you're born, when you're born, your parents.
Translation and change the entire meaning. Just one.
It can change everything. It can change history.
One verse can completely alter everything, And I think what you're saying about New Age, I'd love to touch on that, because I was just watching a video last night about the Dead Sea Scrolls and how In them, they uncovered texts from the earliest Christians before Paul. And they had a guy that they taught called the Spouter of Lies, who sounds a lot like Paul, where he's saying, don't follow the law. He's saying faith over works and stuff like that. And that's really where we see a huge problem within Christianity. Oh, I can do whatever I want, but as long as I pray, that's Pauline theology. That's where that stems from. People are like, what's so bad about Paul? I'm like, he's the one who came in and said, Jesus died for your sins. That that wasn't Jesus's teachings. Sure, you see it in the New Testament because, like that book I was talking about in the video, you actually need to read the New Testament from Paul's teachings into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and James, because his teachings are older and were circulating for 30, 40, 50 years before the earliest manuscripts that we have of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So his teachings likely seeped in because they wanted that's what this big teacher, Paul, he's saying that. So let me add that in so it all sounds cohesive. So it all sounds like this one big storyline. And that's probably not true. But what I thought was super cool was that the first early Christians were called the Ebionites, the Ebion. And the word for Ebion means poor ones. And I thought this line, let me see if I can see it. It's kind of like a small picture. It says, that we are called the poor is not our disgrace, but our glory. That was not a name they gave themselves. So that's what's going on with New Age. And if you really look at it, and if you think about heretic, Gnostic, pagan, witches, conspiracy theories, hippies, all of these labels that have been put on the counterculture. And I'm not big on like being a part of the counterculture, like rebellion, but really there is corruption at the root of these systems. And any group that comes about that starts to threaten that, like the Ebion, this is ancient. They call them, oh, those are the poor ones. They have a poor view of Jesus, is what they said. But they actually held some of the earliest, like they were James the Just was the Ebion leader. That's Jesus's blood brother, James the Just. And he wrote books to contradict Paul's teachings that were like gosh, I forgot what it was called, but it's like the justification of works over faith. Basically, Paul was coming out and people are like, oh, well, Paul was approved by the apostles. We don't know that. There is no evidence of that. Peter, my guy, I don't know. There's other texts about Peter that seem like he might, if that was the only apostle that he had on his side, then personally, I don't know. There's also the Gnostic text of like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, where Peter is shown as being a very sexist, misogynist, called out by the other disciples for disregarding, but that's a whole other topic. So
we really could do this forever. I mean, we
Yeah.
really could.
We will have you back.
Yeah, for sure. But you see this pattern of people labeling groups that they want to demonize them. They want you to not affiliate with those people. And so they turn it into, so yes, we have these ancient texts. And guess what? The New Age is for me, what my interpretation of what the New Age is in a reframe, right? Not victim mentality. The New Age is out there. I'm like, what is the New Age? We're talking about apocalypse, the great unveiling, right? We're saying everyone's got this veil on. But guess what? The veil's coming off. The collective is undergoing a shift. We're all like simultaneously waking up to different aspects. And guess why? Because we have podcasts, because we have books, because we have the internet, because we have social media. What is that if not modern technology creating a new age of awareness, a new age of sharing information faster than we ever have before? So to me, I'm on a mission of actually reclaiming it to what it was meant to be. And being called New Age now, I used to be like, no, I'm not New Age. I used to like really, now I'm like, yeah, whatever. Call me what makes you feel better.
Call me whatever, label me whatever you want.
Makes you feel good. I don't identify as New Age, but I want to be an active participant in the New Age. I am not going to cling to my dusty doctrine and dogma thinking that we had the complete picture from the beginning, because what Christianity did is they created a religion around waiting for the second coming of Christ. And Paul thought it was going to happen in his lifetime, and every church father after has
I was about to say, everybody's always said it's going to happen in my lifetime. And now it's apparently going to happen in this lifetime because it happens
a whole religion around waiting for Jesus to come back, when that's meant to be an internal thing, and people fight that. They don't want that to be the reality. They want it to be, no, we need to worship this external figure and that he's going to come back and save us. Jesus himself said, the kingdom is within and it is also at hand. That to me is pointing clearly that this is something we all have access to within us. The kingdom is ultimately what we want, right? Heaven. Jesus wasn't the one. All we really care about is getting to heaven. Jesus is just the path to heaven. But he says, Don't listen to people say, look here and look there. It's within. And then they take this one verse from Matthew where it's like, "Oh, the heavens will open and Jesus will come back." But I'm like, that is so symbolic. That is so like it's talking, he was referring to a dream that Daniel had in Old Testament language was very symbolic. They use words like that to talk about divine judgment or this and that. Like we're interpreting it from a modern perspective, but we don't have the context that Aramaic language offered or
We don't have the actual correct translation. Ancient Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew, like ancient languages, we cannot say for certain that we have the, factual perfect translations. That's not even possible.
The argument that it's never changed, it's all the same. I'm like, okay, Geneva Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, all the different translations and interpretations, like where is that argument just doesn't land for me anymore.
In order to make a new version of the Bible, a certain amount of words needs to be changed. And as someone who is a Russian speaker who tries to translate sometimes to my husband around my Russian family, I'm like, I don't even have a word for this word. Like, how do I have to literally use 5 words to explain what one word means? I'm like, they're not doing that. Nobody was sitting there. You're not reading the footnotes of the Aramaic to Greek translators who are saying, can be used in this context, but can be used in that context. And this is how it might mean. It's like nobody is doing the work of doing that. And the ones who do, the scholars and the historians who do the work, seldom come to the conclusion that it's all immaculate, that it's all one cohesive story. So that's rarely the conclusion that people come to unless they come in with that framework of, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to prove that everything is lined up. And so they're only looking for
It's all about belief system.
It's all about your beliefs.
Well, it's about the identity that you've conformed to. It really ultimately comes with that. And I feel like there is a way to circle this all together because at the end of the day, this talks about upbringing and religion and dogma and hierarchical situations and this creation of an identity that you've formed to and become to either be a victim or not be a victim or utilize your understanding and evolution and growth of your knowledge to get out of the victim frame. And I think you can take everything we've talked about and step back and view it in so many different ways to have that deeper understanding. But ultimately, it comes down to we hold so much more power than we've ever been told to that we have or to believe. And if we had been taught the true nature and origin of why we're here and who we are, we wouldn't need the systems that are in place.
Exactly. I really try to focus on, to me, my core understanding of Jesus's message. He said, you are not ready for all I have to say. He said it to his disciples. He said, you guys are not ready. Most of you have hardened hearts. You don't have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. But what did he just say? He said, ask, seek, and knock. The answers will be, he left us with the keys to growing our understanding that are still applicable to this day. He also said that the Spirit of truth will come and reveal all things to you. So it's like we really have all the tools that we need for the answers within us. It just takes asking the question. So if there's people here who are resisting, just experiment with you don't need to go off the deep end. You don't need to, go and release everything at once, throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But just ask, seek, and knock. Humbly get on your knees and pray and ask, Father, reveal it to me. Show me. Is there any truth in what these women are saying? Is there any truth, is there any lies that I'm still believing in, but starting even just with specific questions. That's really one time I was in a place where someone was so confidently telling me, no, the Bible's 100% true. And she was a very smart woman. And I was, feeling convicted. And I'm like, you know what, God? I don't want to be spreading misinformation. I don't want to be misleading people. So I got down on my knees and I prayed. And I was like, truly, if I am wrong, correct me now and I will change my ways. I will let it all go. I will literally just dive deep into the Bible and this will be all I study. And you know what I ended up coming across? The Gnostic Gospels. And I'm like, there's all these books that weren't included in the Bible. Hold on. And why not? And then I started reading them. I'm like, oh, that's why. Because they confirm what I already kind of know. But yeah, Christianity doesn't teach that. But there are ancient Christians that believe this stuff. This isn't New Age. This was literally a sect of Christianity that just got diminished because they threatened the power structure. Wow, God, and so if anything, that was the answer I see. Now, maybe not everyone's going to receive the same answer. That's my other thing to leave people with is that there is an ultimate truth, but we are all on different paths to getting to that truth. Like for me, for instance, I'm big on sobriety, right? And I quit weed and I try to help others quit weed. I had a dear friend who actually used weed to facilitate spiritual, experience. She did coaching with cannabis and doing all of that. And at times I was like, God, am I right? Is she wrong? Or, who's right or wrong here? And then I had to come to this place of like, no, where she's at on her journey, that is what she needs. Maybe ultimately she will be led to sobriety, maybe. But for now, for whatever lessons she needs to go through, facilitating cannabis journeys is part of her path. And that's beautiful. And I am accepting that. And that's her truth right now. But we'll see. We'll ultimately all end up finding out we need to be humble and meek and be willing to be wrong and flexible and have nuance. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to just being, willing to ask those questions. Ask, seek, knock. I'm not quoting anybody but this guy, Jesus. I am not quoting anyone but the person that we're all supposedly following. So follow him. Be a Christian. Do what he said to do. Ask, seek, and knock. Because the disciples were not ready. Apostle Paul, 20 years later, I doubt he was that much more advanced than they were, right? Like the times have changed immensely since that period, and consciousness has evolved. We have grown. We have become so much more compassionate. We still went through slavery, thousands of wars probably since
We're
Jesus.
not killing people on the streets and having public executions anymore. We have
Right.
evolved.
We're not killing, we're not burning women at the stake because they are into, herbal medicine or like are, whatever, spiritually enlightened, whatever. Who knows what the witches
I'm sorry, but New Age is science. And, anyway, I know we could talk about this forever.
Yes.
And ever and ever and ever. And here's what's crazy to me is I feel like with or without a book, there is such a high statistical chance that we would all, like, in some forum, come to the same conclusion at some point in our lives. Because us three, like, outside of social media, we all had no connections. And it was social media and the power of social media that brought us together. And we all have collectively learned and came to the same conclusion and understanding through our own experiences. And it's just such a unique and beautiful thing to witness. And then to be able to have the connections that we have, like what an amazing day and age. Everybody demonizes technology and social media. Everything is so meticulously designed. It's incredible. And we need to stop demonizing it and not using it. Utilize it. You're here when you are to do what you do, what you can do for a reason. Words are hard today for me. I don't understand. I'm tired.
It's been a long chat. I've had so much fun.
It's been
So
a
much.
blast. Thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, thanks for hanging in. I know we did some twists and turns, but I think they were beautifully integrated and orchestrated, if you ask me. And I feel like this topic is going to be something we're going to continue to definitely dive deeper into. If you've got questions or concerns or anything, please let us know. We would love to be able to have more of these open conversations here with the questions that you guys have. So bring them to us. We want to know. And as always, we would love to have feedback. I cannot wait for where we're going next episode. I feel like our next mini episodes is just going to continue to be a ripple effect of amazingness and really eye-opening, profound lessons. I'm so grateful for anybody and everybody that has decided they wanted to be guests and said yes, like you, Liz. Thank you so much on our podcast. It has been such a blessing and a joy to hear from you. You are such a wise old soul. I enjoyed this. I feel like we absolutely could have kept going.
For sure.
And I cannot thank you enough.
No, thank you guys. It was so fun. Yeah, this is just my environment. I thrive, just chatting with like-minded souls. And yeah, I appreciate the platform and for seeing something in me, and yeah, just feel the divine connection here. And I'm excited to see your guys' podcast take off for sure. No doubt, with just amazing hosts like you.
Well, I just wanted to reiterate again what you said, Liz, about like, if anything we have said in this latter half of the episode has triggered you in some way, take it to God. Because again, like triggers are there for a reason. A lot of times when people want to confuse that as like, I'm feeling convicted. Da, 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 da. No, there's a distinction between that, and ask God, because I remember having people talk about things that really made me uncomfortable, and I gave it to God, and God just gave me peace, being like, hey, I brought you here. You're listening to this for a reason, and trust that. Because again, I think everyone here can feel our hearts and our posture behind all of this, and know that we truly believe that this is all aligned by God, and this conversation went the way that it was supposed to for a reason. So again,
That's
just
why
thank
we
y'all
let
again.
it naturally flow for a reason. We will see you on the next episode.
Thank y'all.